Inspiration.com.
I have been waiting a long time for this one. Star Wars, Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. As you can see, I have here my Skywalker Saga box set, which was a pain in the ass to get my hands on. Walmart was supposed to have it. Really, the big set that everybody kind of knows about is Best Buy had a 27 disc one with the 4K and the Blu-ray, but I don't have a 4K player, so there was really no reason for me to spend that much money to get that big a set. So I wanted just the Blu-rays, and as you can see, the lid here pops off, and there's a nice little written message here from Mark Hamill, and the three different periods: the prequels, the original trilogy, and the sequel trilogy. Interestingly, they are region free. In fact, they actually have, as you can see, the what makes it look like it's actually a European release, but I've checked. It does play on my PlayStation 4. Anyway, here is the sequel trilogy, and of course, the movie of discussion today, The Rise of Skywalker. This is a complicated one. It's a complicated one to talk about because I did like the movie. In fact, I loved it when I saw it. And I was, but you know, I went in with the right attitude. I think you have to go in with the right attitude for these movies. You know, I think a lot of people go in with the attitude of this has to be better than Empire. This has to justify itself. This has to justify its existence. It was a fun Star Wars movie for me. That's all it was. It wasn't life-changing. It wasn't. It didn't blow my mind. And in fact, I was somewhat disappointed by it. But let me get into that. Okay. First of all, I did a review of Last Jedi. That was one of my very first reviews, and at the time, I defended Rian Johnson. I defended Kathleen Kennedy, and I said, you know, everybody who says that there is no plan, that they're just sort of going from movie to movie, not knowing what they're doing, you're wrong. I maintain that stance. However, I now am willing to admit that behind the scenes of this new trilogy, there are villains, and the villains are Kathleen Kennedy and Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson sabotaged this entire trilogy. Shockingly so. And the fact that Kathleen Kennedy allowed it does go to show a huge level of incompetence on her part, especially when you factor into it all of the problems with all of the other productions, the number of directors who have either quit or been fired. She has clearly mismanaged Lucasfilm. And when you hear about the nonsense that she's getting into now with trying to push a female-driven Star Wars show without clearing it with the higher-ups at Disney and just sort of announcing it so that, you know, she kind of puts them in a corner. It's all a lot of nonsense. She ought to be out. I have no doubt when her contract is up, they're going to push her the hell out. So what ends up coming out after the fact is Colin Trevorrow, who was supposed to direct episode 9, quit because Carrie Fisher died. And in his, there was a plan. There was a plan for this overarching trilogy. But the plan was, it hinged on Carrie Fisher being able to be the center of the 9th movie, which he was going to call Duel of the Fates, which is a better title than Rise of Skywalker. But it hinged on Leia being there as the center of this. And I have no doubt what it was supposed to be is she was going to train Rey, and she was going to be the one to redeem Kylo Ren, which would have made the most sense. You know, that his mother is the one to finally reach out and connect with him. Thematically, that makes a ton of sense. I completely understand that her death threw a huge wrench into the whole process and completely derailed it. I would say that Carrie Fisher's death is, you know, if all the problems on Rise of Skywalker, Carrie Fisher's death is like easily 50%. Like, her death really screwed up their plan. So Colin Trevorrow says, I don't have Leia. I need Luke. So there was a whole year between Carrie Fisher dying and the release of Last Jedi. And Colin Trevorrow comes and he goes, I need you to redo some stuff, reshoot some stuff, so that it's Leia who dies and Luke survives, so that I can have Luke be the character who trains Rey and possibly is the one that, you know, redeems Kylo Ren. And Rian Johnson just said, no, I like my movie. I like my movie the way it is. And basically crossed his arms and said, And like a mother who clearly prefers one child to their sibling, Kathleen Kennedy sides with Rian Johnson, even though it makes no sense. The obvious thing, I was saying it at the time, you ought to go back and redo whatever you have to do. And there's at least 2 points in Last Jedi where you could have easily killed off Leia and had it be seamless. And they wouldn't do it. And they put Colin Trevorrow in this position where he had no choice. He was like, I don't know how to make this movie then. So I'm not going to do it. They get J.J. Abrams to come back, but now they're panicked. Now they don't know what to do because Solo bombed and nobody liked The Last Jedi. And the merchandise isn't selling, the theme park isn't attracting people to come to it the way they thought it would. Star Wars is in decline, and now they've got episode 9, and what do we do with it? Because now they figure, we are in trouble. They get into it and they're like, oh my God, we don't have Leia, but we don't have Luke either. How do we tell this story? They cobbled together some deleted scenes, deleted footage of Carrie Fisher. They add some CGI trickery, and they wrote dialogue around existing dialogue from deleted scenes of Carrie Fisher, which kind of works. It's stilted and a bit weird, but they kind of make it work. I would have rather them do that than not have Leia in it at all. Like, if you opened the movie and Leia was already dead, that would have been disappointing. So I am glad that they did that, but they should have it should have been Luke. Luke should have been around. Again, it wouldn't have been as good. Really, once Carrie Fisher died, that was it. The episode 9 was already not going to be as good a movie as it should have been. That wasn't their fault. But there were things that they could have done. Now, as for the movie, as it exists, Um, Emperor Palpatine, Darth Sidious, has returned, and they have to go find him. They have to find where he is before he can unleash this armada that he's been building up for the last 30 years. And they have to find a Sith dagger, and they have to go find an artifact, and they have to, it's this sort of like a lot of busy work going from place to place to place, meeting these characters that you see for one scene who have really no consequence to the story, who then basically disappear. There's a lot of very curious decisions that they make, setting things up that have no payoff. It's odd. It's really odd, the structure of this movie, and it does not. This is not a flattering comparison. It reminds me of Justice League, of a movie that's just been cobbled together from what they had, while trying to at the same time retcon what people didn't like. I was baffled by the choice to bring back Palpatine. That made no sense to me, and it is a detriment to the movie. He is, it took like the release of the novelization for us to even understand. Oh, this is a clone, and Rey, spoiler alert, is Palpatine's granddaughter, but not really, because apparently Rey's father was a failed clone of Palpatine who looks nothing like Ian McDiarmid, and so now Rey's, that was disappointing. That was one of the good things that worked in Last Jedi that I liked was, you're nobody. You have no place in this story. That was a great twist for Rey, to have her parents not be anybody important, to have them in fact have just dumped her, that they're drunks who just sort of dumped her, sold her for drinking money. That was so good. And they retcon it. No. Her parents were nobody, but really her father was a clone of Palpatine, and they put her on Jakku to keep her safe from him. But it's not as powerful, and it kind of doesn't even make sense. Apparently, I was right. The original plan was that Snoke was going to turn out to be Darth Plagueis, and that it would have turned out that he had been manipulating everything since before Episode 1, and that would have been incredible, and that's what I had been hoping for so much for so long. And it's not canon or anything, but in my mind, Snoke was a clone of Darth Plagueis. That's in my mind. I'm going to say he was. That's just what I'm going to say. But the fact that Snoke turned out to really honestly be inconsequential to the story, you could have just had Kylo Ren be the Supreme Chancellor from the beginning. That would have made more sense than having Snoke be there as just a pointless character. And there are a lot of pointless characters in this trilogy, you come to discover. There is no point to Maz Kanata at all. She doesn't, you think she's been set up to be somebody important, and then she's barely in episode 8 and 9. You think that Rose has been set up to play an important part in episode 9. She's barely in it. And see, this is where, again, it gets tough, because like I said, I did enjoy the movie. The three leads are, I think, very, very good. They're, Daisy Ridley is Rey. She's charismatic. She's fun to watch. I enjoy her. Like I said, I don't like how it ended with her being Palpatine's granddaughter. granddaughter, you know, but I enjoy her character. John Boyega is kind of the most sort of disposable of the three. He's fun to watch, but really Finn doesn't end up having a whole lot to do, and it's another sort of weird subplot. He has something he wants to tell Rey for the entire movie, and never does. And you only find out in like the novelization that he is force sensitive, and that's what he wanted to tell her. And it's like, well, why didn't they just do that in the movie? Why have him say that he wants to tell her something and then not follow through on it and leave it up to our imagination, or we have to read a book? Oscar Isaac as Poe Dameron continues to be a very good sort of. It's funny because he started off, everybody said he was the Han Solo. Turned out he was the Leia. It turned out he was the leader, and that was his story arc. Was, you know, the hot-headed pilot learning to become a leader. That may be the best actually character story arc in the trilogy. Billy D. Williams comes back as Lando Calrissian. He is fun to watch. They have a lot of great little cameos, at least in voice form, from Vader and Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and even bringing in elements from the TV shows. They have a personal favorite character of mine, Ahsoka Tano, gets a line. The movie, it zips along really fast. It feels like a very short, slight movie, even though it's, I think, 2.5 hour plus. This is a movie that could have, I think, benefited from being 3 hours long. I think that they should have just gone Avengers Endgame and just been 3 hours long to conclude this trilogy, and then bring in those elements of Finn being force sensitive, of explaining, for instance, at the end of the story, there's a brand new character who is so forgettable, I can't remember her name, who doesn't know who her father is, and then she talks to Lando, and Lando says it's the first time they meet, and Lando says, well, maybe we ought to go find that out. And you're like, why? You don't know her. Did she even say who she is, what her name is? And you get the feeling like they're maybe setting up like Lando is her father, but they don't ever follow through on it. There's a character played by Kerry Russell who is so underdeveloped that you could take her out of the movie and it wouldn't matter. She could have used some more screen time. A lot of people say, haha, they sidelined Rose. For better or worse, she was a character that was introduced. She should have had some follow through. Maybe try to redeem her in the eyes of the people who didn't like her. You really, the three leads sort of get their story arcs completed, but there was a lot of missed opportunities. That's sort of the subtitle of this entire. There's the prequel trilogy, the original trilogy. They call this the sequel trilogy. It really should be called the trilogy of missed opportunities. Again, I like these movies. I enjoy these movies. I enjoy all the Star Wars movies. I take them for what they are. They're, people assign to them this depth, this deeper meaning, when really the original Star Wars, yes, he did the research. It's Joseph Campbell, and it's Hidden Fortress, and it's Greek mythology, and it's Christian mythology, and it's sort of all these different religions and mythologies and philosophies that are all sort of, joined together into this beautiful, wonderful thing. It's still a fairy tale for children. That's what Star Wars is. It's a fairy tale that was made for children. And I'm going to say this, and people are dismissive of these movies. They're not going to last. Everybody's already forgetting them. They don't matter, blah, 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 blah. Before all of the sort of lockdown stuff, I was in a restaurant. And As I'm walking out of the restaurant, I can hear a mother talking to her kids. And the mother is telling them, gather everything up, get your stuff. And she says to her son, grab your Kylo Ren. And the son has this sort of Kylo Ren figure that he's holding on to. You know, just like the prequel trilogy, who we all, you know, people my age were dismissive of, is now kind of beloved by kids who grew up with them. This sequel trilogy is going to be beloved by this generation, this younger generation, these kids who are 10 years old watching these movies. This is going to be their Star Wars. And just how, like, a lot of people who love the prequels don't really fully understand why people my age love the original trilogy so much, these kids are going to grow up and they're going to go, I don't know what the hype is about, you know, the prequels and the original trilogy. Clearly, Rey is the best character in the entire saga. That's what's going to happen. Because that's what always happens. You know, just like my Tobey Maguire is my Spider-Man. Always will be. But for this new generation, you know, it's the MCU Spider-Man. It's Tom Holland. That's their Spider-Man. My Superman will always be Christopher Reeve. Forever. I don't care who they put in that suit. It'll always be Christopher Reeve. Michael Keaton will always be my Batman. That's normal. It's normal for us to think that ours is the best. What we grew up with, that's the most important iteration of whatever mythology that we have embraced. And that's not always the case, you know. It's subjective. People decide for themselves. And I think it's great. I think it's great that these movies exist. You know, as much as I am disappointed at the overall result, Force Awakens, by far the best movie in the trilogy. I have no qualms about Force Awakens being, saying that it is one of the best Star Wars movies. Superior to Return of the Jedi, which is saying a lot, because I love Return of the Jedi. None of these movies, none of the other trilogies really were planned out very well, and a lot of stuff feels shoehorned in. Leia being Luke's sister, that comes out of nowhere. And anybody who says, oh no, George Lucas knew that from the beginning, really? He had Leia and Luke make out in Empire Strikes Back knowing that they were brother and sister? No. What happened is Vader said, I am your father. The world went nuts, and Lucas said, oh, that worked. Let's try that again. Let's do that again. And so he makes Luke and Leia brother and sister. The prequel trilogy, if you watch those movies, episode 1 and 2 and the first half of episode 3, very little of consequence happens. And it's almost as if Lucas, you know, said to himself halfway through episode 3, oh shit, I haven't done anything to set up the next trilogy. Okay, he becomes Darth Vader, and, you know, he fights Obi-Wan, and like all this stuff happens in the second half of the third and final movie in the prequel trilogy. None of these movies these trilogies are planned out all that well. I take them for what they are. They're entertainment. I will, for the rest of my life, pop in Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, watch them and enjoy them. I just will. And you can disagree with me, and you can say these movies are shit, and that's fine. That's your opinion. You don't have to watch them. I don't understand the anger, getting so angry and so worked up Um, well, they destroyed Luke Skywalker. Did they? Just don't watch these movies, okay? Luke Skywalker's story for you ended with Return of the Jedi. The end. And you can say, well, yeah, but yeah, it's over. It's done. Don't watch these other movies. You just don't have to. You don't have to watch them. You just don't have to watch them. That's the beauty of, I was talking about having my MCU collection, right? And they announced Spider-Man Far From Home. That's going to be the final movie in Phase 3. And I'm like, shit. I'm going to have to fucking buy Spider-Man Far From Home, and I'm going to have to stick it in the case. And it doesn't feel like a very good ending. Avengers Endgame is the ending, blah, blah, blah. And then I realized, I don't have to buy Spider-Man Far From Home. I don't have to acknowledge it as the final movie in Phase 3. I can just buy Avengers Endgame and then be done. And that's what I did. I bought this box set. You don't have to. You can just have your original trilogy, maybe have your prequel trilogy, and then just don't watch the sequels. No reason to get angry about them. So Rise of Skywalker, I am going to give it, I'm going to give it 3 out of 5. I'm going to give it 3 out of 5. If Force Awakens was, and it is in my opinion, like almost a perfect 5 out of 5, I'm going to give this 3 out of 5. Better than Last Jedi, not as good as Force Awakens. So that's it. I recommend it. And please don't hunt me down and kill me for that opinion.
Their worlds. Sort of gave myself the challenge of, okay,